everyone. Wayne Motts, the President Emeritus and historian at the Gettysburg Foundation. I'm with Alyce Evans. We're inside the Eisenhower farmhouse at the Eisenhower National Historic Site. Alyce is a park guide here at this National Historic Site. And for those of you that watch our videos frequently, we're going to do a special video today about the Eisenhower family and the Eisenhower farm. And we want to do this special video today, talk to Alyce a little bit about the 80th commemorative activities and events that we're going to have out here at the Eisenhower National Historic Site for the 80th anniversary of June 6th, 1944. And Alyce, today, let's, if we can, because I know you wanted to talk about it, let's talk about the president's son, John S.D. Eisenhower, and his interesting career. What can you tell us about him and his activities, especially for June 6th?
Yeah, so obviously June 6th, 1944 changed the world. Everyone around the world felt the effects of that very important invasion that would eventually lead to Allied victory in Europe. But for the Eisenhower family, June 6th was not just important to Dwight David Eisenhower. It was also very important to their son, John Sheldon Dowd Eisenhower. So John, of course, grew up in a typical military family. You know, his mom and dad were all around the world as Ike learned the lessons of leadership and excelled in his military career. So before his father becomes a general, John decides that he wants a similar life, that he decides he's going to apply to the military academy at West Point, just like his dad had done. His dad becomes a one-star general in John's first year at West Point, and then of course his career skyrockets after that because of the effects of the Second World War. So John's class was actually accelerated. The classes at West Point during the war were kind of pushed through quicker to get those soldiers into the conflict to start serving on a quicker timeline than they would have in peace.
Sure.
So John ends up graduating. His graduation date is June 6th of 1944.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, you can't make this.
So the president has to make, and at that time, the Supreme Allied Commander, because that's what Eisenhower is, he's got to make these decisions, and he also knows his son is going to end up probably somewhere in military service.
Yeah, so one of the things I admire about General Eisenhower is his deep concern for the common soldier. You know, in the months leading up to D-Day, he spent about 70% of his time out there, you know, speaking to the soldiers that were preparing for this conflict. And I think in some ways he obviously couldn't help but think of his own son. He was very aware of the fact that John had made the decision to serve his country the way that the general had. And that, yes, John would be probably joining this conflict. Ike was not going to get the war won before his son graduated. So he could very deeply empathize with the fact that every soldier he was speaking to was somebody's son or husband or brother. There was someone back home in the United States that loved him. So Eisenhower could very much make that connection on a personal level. And obviously, John and Mamie were not aware that the invasion, the exact date it was going to happen. Eisenhower was very careful in his correspondences with them to not give away any pertinent information. So they knew the invasion was going to happen. They did not know the exact date. Mamie had plans actually to hide out the day of the invasion. She was planning to hide at the apartment of their good friends George and Mary Allen. She didn't want to be, you know, in the limelight having to answer questions when she really would not have. Ike, of course, did not want to abuse his privilege by bringing Mamie over. So she stayed in Washington, D.C., so she'd always be close to news in case something tragically might have happened to her husband. She wanted to get that information as quickly as possible. So it made sense for her to stay in D.C. So she had a plan all set up that she was going to avoid the cameras, avoid the press, but as fate would have it, she's not going to be in Washington, D.C. Of course, she's going to be up at West Point, the only one of John's two parents who are available to actually watch him graduate. So on the morning of June 6th, Mamie is actually awoken at a hotel outside of West Point by reporters at 7 o'clock in the morning asking her what her thoughts were on the invasion. And she, of course, first being woken up, she's like, "What?" And then she said, "No comment," and quickly hung up the phone. So that day was not the day that John and Mamie had expected to spend together. John was not raised with a father that was famous for most of his life. You know, John's only been dealing with the sudden fame of his father for the last couple years. So he's not expecting to be an important person during his graduation. He is an equal amongst all. This is all of the class of 44's special day. But suddenly there are reporters everywhere. They want to speak to John and Mamie. They want their thoughts on, you know, Eisenhower leading this very important invasion. And John was deeply embarrassed in a lot of ways because the limelight was on him, not on his class who deserved that moment. So for that entire class, for an entire year of West Point graduates, everyone would always think when they said, oh, June 6th, they would not think of their graduation day. They would think of the invasion. So I think that was a moment for all of those young men that they realized the world had changed.
And so Alyce, he graduates. What happens to him? So give us a little bit about his after June 6th.
Yeah. So he is given a bit of kind of a blessing from the higher ups, from Marshall and FDR, to head over to see his dad for a couple weeks after the invasion. So for a little, about a month, John actually goes over to England and Normandy and is with his dad.
They usually get a furlough after graduation, but I didn't know whether in World War II, because they need people, but usually after your graduation you get a month furlough.
Yeah, John was still allowed that furlough, and he was basically sent over to his dad. I mean, and that was not just for John's benefit, but for Ike's benefit. I mean, he's been leading, one of the most stressful invasions, so many things that he had to take into consideration. So being able to have his son there, especially since there was obviously no way Ike was making it home for his graduation. So they get a couple weeks together to kind of reacquaint each other, and John gets his first taste of what military life is like. But he's then sent back to the United States, and he goes to continue training to go into the infantry, and he briefly did serve for the remainder of, basically from the fall of 44 until the end of the conflict in Europe in 45. John does not have, though, the trajectory that his fellow classmates do, for the very obvious reason that his last name is Eisenhower. Right. John is not going to be leading soldiers on the front line like his fellow classmates were going to be doing. They had to take into consideration what would happen to Ike if John was tragically killed. Like how awful would that have been for Ike to then have to carry that burden? But also if he was captured, what that would mean for Allied command. So John did not quite have the trajectory that he thought he would have. He stayed behind front lines, doing more supportive roles.
Oh, wow. And so Alyce, then he stays in military service, though. He makes a career out of the military, just like his father does. So what does that look like for him? He serves in what kind of capacities and retires out of the military?
Yeah. So John has kind of a very exciting and eclectic career after that. He does stay in the Army through the 1950s. He will serve in Korea as well. That was, of course, he is sent overseas to Korea while his dad is running for the presidency in 1952. So again, that has a big impact on where he can be placed and what he's doing during the Korean War. After the war, he returns to Washington, D.C. He works with his dad's administration. In the 1960s, he helps his father write his presidential memoirs, which I think really helped set John on the career of becoming an author himself. Wonderful historian, wrote several excellent treatises, not just on World War II, but other conflicts. I know he wrote a book about World War I, the Mexican War we were just talking about before this video. So for a while, John is ambassador to Belgium, and eventually, though, he will achieve the rank of brigadier general, so we did have another General Eisenhower in the U.S. Army.
And he is the only surviving child of the president, so he has children. And so the president's direct line comes from him.
Right. Yeah. The Eisenhowers had two children, though. Their first son dies before John was born, so John is their only surviving child. And John has 4 children, and I think it's really poignant. There is a really great program that was filmed in the 60s. It was called D-Day Plus 20, where General Eisenhower went back to England and Normandy, places involved in planning and preparing for the invasion. He speaks to Walter Cronkite through this. And the very end of this program, he's actually in the Normandy cemetery, and he's sitting there amongst the graves of American soldiers who gave their all to ensure Allied victory. And he talks about the fact, that his son graduates and he enters the conflict. But it's so poignant because he talks about, John had the opportunity to live a long life, and that many soldiers that served under General Eisenhower were not able to have that. So for Eisenhower, being a grandfather and having been able to watch his son have a full, productive life meant absolutely the world to him. And Eisenhower was never unaware of the fact that many families would never have that privilege.
Right, right. What a unique perspective that he would have had. So, Alyce, once again, there'll be commemorative activities and events here at the Eisenhower National Historic Site for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, June 6th, 2024. And where can people get more information regarding that?
Right. So the best place to get information about all of our special events is at our website, www.nps.gov/EISE, the first 4 letters of Eisenhower. We'll have all of our list of special events. We're going to be doing special programming here on site. We're going to be doing walks in the National Cemetery over at the Gettysburg battlefield, commemorating those soldiers who gave their all for our country. We'll be doing a naturalization ceremony on June 6th, which I think is very appropriate. Eisenhower, his, I think, guiding ethos was service to country, and we're happy to welcome these new citizens into our country through the democratic process.
We certainly appreciate your time. We want all the viewers, we encourage all of you to make sure that you follow and like all the social media channels for the Eisenhower National Historic Site, not just Gettysburg National Military Park, and also for the Gettysburg Foundation, and help support this effort out here at the Eisenhower National Historic Site. We sure appreciate your time, Alyce. We hope you have a very meaningful 80th anniversary of D-Day. What the day that changed the world, the day that changed the world. There's simply no question about it. And for all the viewers, if you haven't been out here at Eisenhower National Historic Site, plan a visit next time you're in Gettysburg to make sure you get out here. Alyce, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne.